if it feels like you can't do anything without some critical voice in your head chirping about how you're probably gonna screw up or embarrass yourself or ruin everything and be doomed to a life of misery and loneliness, it's a safe bet that you're probably over it. And who the heck can blame you? If that critical voice were a real person following you around, you probably would have called the police by now or even stuffed them in a dumpster. But that's pretty hard to do with something that lives inside your head. Well, fear not, because by the end of this video, you will have leveled up your understanding of what the heck that critical voice is, where it comes from, and how you can turn down its volume so you stop feeling like shit all the time. I'm Laura Brown, and not only am I a human being with my own long-standing relationship with an inner critic, I'm also a therapist who's helped a buttload of people become pros at dealing with their own critical voice. At Better Halves, we're on a social media mission to help people learn to manage fear and insecurity so that they can feel like their best goddamn selves. So buckle up and stick around until the end, because I'm going to be giving away a juicy little tool to help you turn down the volume on your own internal critic. It's super easy to take this for granted, but have you ever noticed how most of the conversations you have in a day actually take place in your head? If you stop and pay attention, you'll notice that you're constantly chatting with someone in your mind. Sometimes with yourself, sometimes with one of the thousands of people you've cloned and internalized, but always with someone inside. And no, you're not actually crazy. This is totally normal. A lot of those conversations may be neutral.
I see a lamp.
Or even positive.
Damn, that kitty cat's looking handsome.
But some of them are not so nice, and they tend to stick out like a sore thumb.
You fucking suck.
Your inner critic draws your attention to the things you're sensitive or insecure about, particularly things that you're scared people will judge your ass for. All of this understandably makes you feel stressed out, anxious, hopeless, or even depressed. Now, you're probably thinking that the very existence of your inner critic is totally fucked up and dysfunctional, like your brain wasn't wired right in the factory. This may be an unpopular opinion, but the fact that you have an inner critic isn't exactly a bad thing. Even though that critical voice doesn't exactly make for a fun time, it does serve an adaptive purpose, which we'll get into. But first, it's story time. So, I used to truly believe that I hated myself. Puberty hit me hard. I remember scribbling away my diary in grade 5, boasting about how I was the most popular girl in my class. I wasn't, and was so cool. Fast forward only 1 year later, and it was the complete opposite. Dear diary, I hate myself so much. I'm so ugly and fat and disgusting, and no one likes me. I wrestled with this nasty, mean voice for almost 20 years. And I tried everything. All the self-help books, all the hypnosis, all the CBT, all the positive affirmations. And it would work, sort of, for a short period of time. Fake it till you make it, wind in my sails. But that nasty, critical voice with all its hurtful words would always sneak back in and make me believe that I was the worst human being alive. And this voice had a lot of evidence to prove that I wasn't worthy of love, from myself or anyone else for that matter. I was single, I was broke, I was chubby, I engaged in binge eating and spending money that I didn't have. I escaped with a cocktail of weed, food, wine, and my favorite TV shows. Then I felt like an even bigger loser for relying on those things. A lot of people might think that the way I overcame this was by changing the behaviors and proving to myself that I was worthy of loving myself. But it actually wasn't. Through helpful conversations and learning more about the human condition, I came to realize that I actually wasn't broken and that I didn't need to be fixed, but that I had found very creative ways to survive and resist feelings of insecurity and fear. And that's exactly what we're here to teach you how to do too. Okay, so let's get back to the crazy idea that the critical voice that lives in your head isn't actually the enemy.
What?
I know, hard to believe, but it's actually there to protect you.
No way, you're Delulu.
I get it. Why in the fuck would human beings have an internal voice saying horrible, nasty things to us? And how could that be anything but problematic? Doesn't make much sense at first, but stick with me.
Make it make sense.
Okay, so in order for this to make sense, we need to go back in time. No. Way back in time. Even further than that, like 100,000 years ago back. Back when we used to live in caves and didn't have the security of modern life with running water, electricity, and grocery stores, it was imperative for us to get along and work together to get our next meal and fight off whatever animals wanted to make us their next meal. Because of this very primitive need to belong to a group, we developed an innate fear of rejection and exclusion. Why? Because if we got kicked out of the group, we dead. And I mean real dead. And whether or not we belonged depended on how closely we lived up to the group's rules and ideas of what it means to be a decent cave person. So if the group rule is that everyone takes one serving of woolly mammoth before going back for seconds, and Fiona gets a bit cocky and grabs 2 meaty mammoth ribs, you better believe it's over for her. And those saber-toothed kitties are going to be feasting on Fiona's succulent bones with the quickness. Okay, that got a little dark. This is where the social anxiety and feelings of insecurity make total sense. Clearly, our species has not lost that instinct for inclusion. This survival instinct fits hand in glove with human insecurity, which set the stage for that critical voice. If Fiona felt insecure and afraid of getting rejected, she would feel on alert and have that little voice saying, "Don't be bad, don't be greedy, don't go for seconds. Janet and Janice would rat you out, and then you dead, girl." The critical voice is a response to and representation of our fear and insecurity and parrots the values and rules of the group. Today, the list of rules and expectations can seem endless. That's why it can feel like we fully hate ourselves, because we can't actually be everything that our society expects of us. We gotta be wealthy, have just the right body, be educated, have a well-respected job, own a home, have 2 cars, 2 kids, and go on vacation multiple times a year, and more. Oh, and on top of all of it, we have to be fucking confident. All of that is to say that we are vulnerable to judgment, exclusion, and rejection, and there's a long list of ways we can be judged, excluded, and rejected. Your critical voice is like your radar for the things you're aware of that could end with you being seen by others in a bad light. I'm gonna give you a strategy that's not only helped me, but tons of my own clients in therapy over the years. Like so many problems in life, you need to start with awareness and challenge yourself to even notice your critical voice when it pops into your head. I know, this is likely the last thing you want to do. It can be totally uncomfortable to even acknowledge and engage with that voice. It's in our nature to want to avoid anything that feels shitty, so you're probably pretty good at finding ways to distract yourself from really even facing your critical voice. Despite not wanting to engage, the first step in changing your relationship to your critical voice is to notice it and name it. When an unkind thought crosses your mind, acknowledge to yourself, "That bitch right there, that's my critical voice." Why do this? First, it allows you to have more of an arm's length relationship with your inner critic, rather than feeling consumed by it and responding reactively. Secondly, it's an acknowledgement that although it's a thought you're having, you don't have to agree with it. We're taught all sorts of bullshit over the course of our lives, and it's not like we can just erase old, outdated perspectives and beliefs just because we form new ones that we prefer. We intentionally choose to disregard them. Take prejudice, for example. A lot of people learn some sort of prejudiced or discriminatory ideas while growing up, and then hopefully arrive at the conclusion that they're stupid and whack as they get older. You may very well still have prejudiced or discriminatory thoughts cross your mind because you've been taught to think that way, but you become able to privately respond to them like, "Nah, that's not cool." The same is true of your critical voice. Just because you're thinking something doesn't mean you're down with it. After acknowledging the presence of your critical voice, it can also be helpful to remember the fact that you as a human being have an evolutionary need to belong, and that even though it's not super obvious, the fear you feel around rejection or exclusion comes from a place of care for yourself. Remember, fear of rejection and judgment and feelings of insecurity are normal. They're there to protect us so we don't die on this crazy, dangerous planet. And while they may be normal and understandable because we're human, the messaging that can go along with them is likely not totally fair or even accurate. If you do the first step, then you're well on your way to the second, which is all about emotional regulation. A common reason why the critical voice is often a problem for people is because they deal with it through avoidance. And that avoidant behavior creates other problems in their life. That just gives the critical voice more ammo. Among the most effective and destructive avoidance strategies are addictions to things like alcohol and other substances, gambling, shopping, or even food. Insecurity and fear feels bad, so we do things that feel good. Unfortunately, despite your best intentions to protect yourself from hard feelings, numbing out your critical voice means you fail to deal with it. And you become dependent on things to regulate your emotions, which only compounds the problem and makes you feel even shittier about yourself. We're all about self-empowerment, and so even though it's harder in most ways, we strongly encourage you to face your hard feelings, to build trust that you ain't gonna die from feeling them. For example, if your critical voice is saying, "You're an idiot, you can't do anything right, and no one is ever gonna like you, let alone love you," take a deep breath and do something to bring you back to the present moment. This can be hard to do in moments of distress, so we've included a link to a free guide to help you out just with that. Just peep the description down below. When you're feeling emotionally clear enough to think, it's time to explore why your critical voice is showing up when it is. If you're a pen and paper kind of person, grab a journal and flesh out the who, what, where, when, and why of the situation. You'll find a reflection exercise in the description down below, but for now, some questions worth answering are, what happened, and specifically, what the heck were you doing before your critical voice piped up? What was it about that particular situation that makes sense for your critical voice to make an appearance? Keep in mind all of the daft rules and expectations our society has for us, and how they're likely part of the equation. Like maybe you struggle with the expectation that you need to come across as uber successful in order to have any worth as a person. You can ask, are there any particular insecurities or fears that tie into the message of your critical voice? For example, if you have an insecurity around success, even small, everyday mistakes like spilling your coffee can have your inner critic all like, "You idiot! How are you ever gonna make something of yourself if you can't even keep from spilling a cup of joe?" If its goal is to protect you from shame or embarrassment or rejection, what could be shameful or embarrassing about what you are doing? Emotional validation for yourself is your BFF. If it's too hard to provide this to yourself because your critical voice doesn't make it easy, imagine a friend experiencing something similar and how you would feel for them. Why is it understandable for you or them to feel insecure or fearful of rejection? Why does it make sense to be critical about this particular subject? Are there any experiences you've had that have taught you to be on high alert for times like this? Because you don't need a Darwin Award on your mantle, remember that fear and insecurity are there to help keep you alive. These feelings have been part of our species' survival, so we cannot expect ourselves to think our way out of having them. Instead, we have to accept that fear and insecurity are part of our human experience, and it's all about dealing with them effectively. Even though it may sound ass backwards, the idea that your critical voice is there to help you survive makes sense. What we're basically encouraging by laying out this approach to dealing with your critical voice is a radically different way of handling insecurity. Because running away from it, creating a facade to conceal it, or living a life on defensive mode don't work. In fact, they usually make you more insecure, and the prevalence of your critical voice worse. Instead, mindfully acknowledging the presence of your critical voice and reminding yourself that it exists to help you avoid the pitfalls of social alienation can help make it feel less distressing when it shows up. The final step is to then assert your own preferred, more fair and realistic message over the ones that your critical voice carries. Let's say, like me, your critical voice says, "You look fat today." And I feel insecure and shameful hearing this message. Part of me would love to escape feeling this way because it fucking sucks to have these feelings. But because I've trained my emotional muscles, I would then acknowledge to myself, I feel insecure right now, and it's showing up with this old story that I should feel ashamed of my body because I'm not a size 0, and society celebrates and values this body type more than mine. And I don't actually agree with society's rule that in order to have value as a human being, a body has to be a certain size. I'm having this hard feeling, but I don't agree with it. And then I can focus my attention on how to nurture or care for myself while this feeling is here, and trust that it will eventually ease and go away. By following the steps we laid out in this video, you can expect that the intensity of your critical voice will decrease over time. By mindfully holding your critical voice at arm's length and remembering its purpose, you can feel less distressed and discouraged when it pipes up. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like and subscribe and let us know in the comments what your critical voice tends to focus on. And don't forget to download the free guide to emotional regulation as well as the reflection questions to help you explore why the heck your critical voice is showing up when it does. Until next time, take care.